my talk. Here we go. How he said he living life as a gringo, where you question where you fit in every time you mingle. They say you do this with not enough that. My rapping is really bad. This life as a gringo.
Yes, hello and welcome to another episode of Life as a Gringo. I am Dramos, of course. And man, in what feels like forever, I think this might be the first one of the season, if I'm not mistaken. We're going to do a regular Tuesday episode with just me blabbing about what's been on my mind. If you enjoy those episodes, this is a beautiful gift for you. If you hate them, I'm sorry. I ask you to just stomach it because I'm very excited about this one. And I'm going to get kind of right into it. I'm not going to sit here BSing about nonsense for too long. Because I've had a bit of an epiphany this year, right? I started this year in a really sort of aggressive mindset of this is my make or break year, right? And for a number of reasons, I can't necessarily get into it completely, just for the sake of being a good business partner with some of the contracts that I have and partnerships that I have, right? So I'll try to be as specific as possible to kind of give you an idea of it, but I want to be respectful of my partners and not, divulge too much information that maybe they wouldn't want out there, right? I don't give a shit, but, in a partnership, you got to think about your other half, right? So for a few different reasons, I felt like, I've been riding a really great wave over these last few years, but this was really the year that I have to prove myself, right? And this would be the year where I felt like I would be able to establish my ability to have longevity on my current path, right? My current path of being self-employed, of being a full-time creative, and it's been an amazing almost 3-year journey of being self-employed. Each year has gotten better opportunity-wise, financially, but it's hard to continue to recreate that sort of success. And for me, I felt like this would really be the proving ground if this was going to be something sustainable, right? And I put a lot of pressure on myself. Quite honestly, nobody said that to me. These are sort of my own assumptions and my own gut feelings about things. But I placed a lot of pressure on myself. I mean, I started this year really just I basically started this year burnt out because I went into it so fucking gung-ho, I gotta make or break this year, I was at the point where I was basically from January to the end of May, Memorial Day weekend, I am not going out. I'm not going to do anything except work. I was trying to become a psychotic robot, basically. And I legitimately burnt myself out within the first month of trying to do this, right? And, I'm already obviously coming off of a chaotic last year in a good way, and in general, just sort of fighting the idea of just chronically having so much going on, right? Just my personality. I'm always creating. I'm always working on other projects and things of that nature. And I don't usually take many breaks, right? And I was incredibly unhappy and burnt out for the majority of the beginning part of this year, to be quite honest with you. And it's not until, I would say, the last few weeks that I feel like I've really begun to just ease the reins a little bit and allow myself to just sort of create and have fun and sort of just surrender to the idea that as long as I continue doing that, the universe and God and life are going to reward me in some sort of way. And again, as I use those words, interchange it as you see fit, whatever works for you, right? And as I've begun to surrender that, I feel like I've begun to get a lot more clarity, not necessarily on where I'm going or sort of what I feel like is the next step, the next evolution of my career, but clarity in the sense of what makes me happy and a bit more peace in the sense of not holding on so tight and being so frustrated when things don't work out the way I planned, or not allowing viewing the success of my peers, to sort of make me just give up on all that I've been building, right? And it's also, I feel like, awakened me into the next evolution of where my mind is in terms of what I view success as and how I want to sort of create my life, if you will, right? And I wanted to share that a bit today. I'm really going to do we're going to have an Ask a Gringo segment, but beyond that, I'm just going to kind of freestyle a couple ideas and things that I've been working through because I think there is something there. It's brought me a lot of peace, and I think it could be really beneficial for many of you listening, especially those of us who grew up in the communities that we did, where I know for me, I definitely felt a sense of pressure of proving people wrong, and proving people wrong meant financially being wealthy and successful. At the same time, knowing that my parents didn't financially plan for the future, feeling the burden of having to be able to pick up the slack for them, right? Wanting to, really. For others, maybe it is the perfectionism that comes as a result of having immigrant parents, or the guilt trip that comes from having immigrant parents, whatever it might be, or just societal norms in general of what we're quote unquote supposed to do as adults, careers, whatever it might be. And I think all of that is very conducive to not living a happy and fulfilled life. And I feel like I've had a bit of an awakening as to getting really down to what truly makes me happy and how I can create and implement a more fulfilled and a more dream life, right? So I wanted to just share that with you guys today. That's what we're going to be talking about. And let's just do it. I'm feeling fired up. Let's get into it. We'll do it in our Mi Gente segment.
Mi gente.
So first and foremost, I'm going to probably bounce around a bit, but I want to just start with a statistic. So I got this from a CNBC article. It's actually a State of the Global Workplace 2022. So it's obviously almost 2 years old at this point, from Gallup. They did this report. They found that along with dissatisfaction, workers are experiencing staggering rates of both disengagement and unhappiness. 60% of people reported being emotionally detached at work, and 19% as being miserable. Only 33% reported feeling engaged, and that is even lower than 2020. In the U.S. specifically, 50% of workers reported feeling stressed at their jobs on a daily basis, 41% as being worried, 22% as being sad, and 18% as being angry. To summarize all that, majority of people are unhappy with their jobs or stressed out when it comes to their jobs in some way, shape, or form, right? And I want to just read that statistic because if you're in that place, you're not alone. I've been there, and unfortunately, it seems like most of the world and most of America are at that place, right? And what's begun to kind of occur to me as I've just really fucking just unplugged a bit, right? And I've been releasing the shame of not being hyper productive, and I apologize to anybody who's waiting on something for me for the last month or so, but I've really just been fucking off and giving myself time, sleeping in, going away to Puerto Rico, going away to on bike rides in the middle of the work week, things like that, right? Really just leaving myself open, hey, you know what? I'm just going to go and hang out with friends and be social and do whatever it might be. But I think within that, I've kind of alleviated some of the weight that I've been unnecessarily carrying around. And with that came a bit of clarity. And what I've sort of begun to realize about my life philosophy, and I think the one that many of us are taught or following in some way, shape, or form, is we are sort of basing our lives around the wrong idea, right? And even if you even for me, I always said, I want to have a job that I love, that it makes me happy at the end of the day, right? And that sort of has been the North Star. But I think I've also clouded that North Star a little bit, right? Where I've also said, yeah, I want that, but I also want this specific house, this specific salary, and all the bells and whistles that sort of come along with that, right? And at the same time, I want to have this sort of level of perceived success from the outside looking in. And that's all sort of varied throughout different parts of my life. My struggle with outside validation obviously made me go 100 miles an hour in that direction of wanting to have the job title, the fame, the fortune, all that stuff. I've since sort of reeled that back as I've done a lot of work on myself, but parts of it still exist, right? And, I even talked about like goal setting and things like that. For the longest time on my fridge in my kitchen, which it ironically like disappeared. I have no idea what happened to it. I have no idea what happened to it. It just disappeared off my fridge. And I'm not sure what happened to it. The universe might be telling me something. But I had this house on my fridge that is far more expensive than I can afford right now. And I had it as like this goal, like, oh my God, I'm going to reach this point in life where I'm going to get to buy this beautiful home, right? And of course I still want it. Of course, it's beyond just showing off to people. It's not something I would like publicly post, but I would love the idea of living in it. But what I also realized and didn't really kind of like, sort of like properly stew on in the moment, I actually went to go visit that house, right? I visited it twice. It was on the market twice. I think it just got sold recently. And after every time I left the house, like while I'm in the house, I'm like, oh, this is beautiful, blah, blah, blah. Every time I left the house, I would feel frustrated and disappointed and angry and like this sort of almost like this rush, not even like a rush, but like this sort of idea in my head, like how the fuck do I figure out how to buy this house now? And then getting frustrated and angry at myself because I wasn't in the position to buy it yet. And what does this sort of mindset do, right? Why am I even sharing this? What I realize is that takes me out of the place of gratitude for the life that I've already built. Now, granted, I do want this house. I do believe it would provide a great quality of life for me and my family in the future, right? But that doesn't erase or negate the fact that I already have an amazing life, right? I've already achieved the goal of owning my first property, and I'm able to enjoy it right now. And it's big enough for what I need it for, right? It's more than enough, and that I'm able to have other investments and that I'm able to work for myself, right? But all of those beautiful things went out the window the moment that I began prioritizing this more grandiose sort of lifestyle. And again, I believe I deserve it. I believe I'm going to get it one day. But I think you have to realize sort of where the priorities lie, right? Because what happens now? I want to make more money basically to obtain this house, right? That's my thought process. So I then begin to deviate potentially from my purpose because I'm saying I need to make more money. So what does that mean? I'm going to then grab another job, another gig, another project that I'm necessarily not passionate about maybe, and that is a strain to me to work on. But in the long run, I know it's going to give me that extra money that I might need. But think about what I'm doing. I'm bringing stress into my life unnecessarily, disrupting the peace that I already have if I allow myself to, just for the sake of being able to have this materialistic thing in my life. And that's where I began to like, oh shit, you're going about this the wrong way. That materialistic thing, as amazing and as happy as it would make me, it's not worth it if it disrupts the peace that I've developed in my life, right? And that's where it gets down to really prioritizing what you truly want in this life, right? And this is where we go wrong in society as a whole, as a culture. We're told to bust your ass to then get the job, even though it's not a job you're passionate about, but you got to get the job because you have to be able to buy a house and have a family and have a car and all these different things, right? But your job is where you spend most of your time at, right? So you're literally basing your entire life and decisions you make in this life around the idea that you have to have this job, right? A job, one that pays you X amount of money, right? And what I'm beginning to sort of realize now in these moments, all that stuff is great. Obviously, you need to have your essentials met. You don't want to be out in the street and live an unnecessarily difficult life. But I think the key mindset is not how do I get that high-paying job that I might not be passionate about, but it provides me with all the materialistic things. But instead, how do I get down to what truly makes me happy in this life and then build around that, right? Which is sort of what I've done, from my time leaving the Breakfast Club in 2021 to now in 2024. The idea was addition through subtraction, right? Okay, I leave the job that I have to be at Monday through Friday where I'm on somebody else's schedule, and I get a remote job where I get to be home, and it's a far more flexible schedule, right? And that was when I was doing like the podcast producing job. And then, okay, now I don't necessarily, I'm not desperate for that transitionary money anymore, and it's beginning to take up more time than is worth it for me. Let me move on from that job and focus fully on my own projects, right? then I'm fully in control. And that is sort of the life that I've wanted for myself. I want the ability to wake up on my own time, right? The ability to make my own schedule, to have the peace of mind to not have a boss breathing down my neck, but to just spend my day creating as I see fit, right? And obviously it's not perfect. There are things I need to have boundaries on, or things I need to implement that can improve all of this. But I've sort of, at that point, decided what type of life I want to lead, and then made decisions based around that, right? And for me, during that time period, the decisions that I made and the projects that I became involved in, like Life as a Gringo, luckily for me, there was a social cachet involved in it, right? It was like, oh, Dramos got a deal with iHeartRadio. He has his own show now. And maybe it's not The Breakfast Club, but it's his own thing. And he's partnered with a big network and he's getting paid to do that. He's a professional podcaster now, right? Or he's doing speaking engagements and he's getting paid to do these things. I see it. Oh, that's amazing, right? I was still getting the rush of the public validation, right? And what I've begun to sort of realize recently is I'm holding on to this idea, right? That's why I was coming to this year like, man, big year. We got to make shit happen. This is our year to prove ourselves. To who? Right? That's what I've begun to realize is, yeah, I'm Dramos the podcaster as like my career right now. But maybe next year I'm Dramos the dry cleaner owner. And that is beyond okay, as long as being Dramos the dry cleaner owner still provides me with my non-negotiables, the type of life that I want to lead, right? And I think that's what we have to begin to strip ourselves away of, begin to detach from. You know, you're not your job title. And people have said that. You're not your job title. Your job title or your career is not just something that your family and friends can brag about, or you could brag about at dinner parties, right? Like, we have to start thinking beyond that and be more in touch with us, the person. What puts us in the happiest place, right? What is the most fulfilling thing for us? Who cares about if it makes sense for anybody else, right? I think that's like the biggest lie we've been fed, is this idea of career and retiring and all these different things. It's like, so what if it's a societal norm that you get a career, a job title, and you stay there till you retire? That's respectable. Why? If that's not what you want to do with your life, why does that have to be the path? Because that makes the most sense. That allows people to put you in that box for themselves. Other than that, it doesn't make sense, right? If it goes against what you truly want in this life, if it's not making you happy, like, half of the people in America talk about their job stressing them out, is it really worth forcing yourself to stay there? Or should you begin to build a life that actually allows you to have your non-negotiables or is based around what actually makes you happy at the end of the day, right? I hope I'm making sense. I know I'm bouncing around. I think what I'm sort of getting at when it comes to me, and I'm using myself as an example and take from it what applies. What I'm saying is, don't get caught up in the identity of who you're supposed to be based on what you've done and the expectations of others. The goal is not to be able to fit neatly into a box or to be able to wear your personal brand as this very easily digestible thing for others. The goal should literally be, whatever gets me to the life that I enjoy living, that's where I'm going to focus my energy on. Maybe it's this career today. It might be another one tomorrow. But whatever keeps me getting closer and closer to that place of fulfillment and ideal lifestyle. And that has brought me a real sense of peace in saying, just keep doing what you love and trust that, as it always has, it will lead you to the next thing if it's meant for you to transition. Don't stress about trying to hold on to the current life that you identify with, but just surrender to the idea that as long as you continue to stay true to what you want your life to look like, it will all figure itself out in some way, shape, or form, as long as you just keep on showing up and creating. And that's what I'm telling myself currently. That's what's been bringing me so much peace as of late. And there are a few things I actually want to get into on this idea of surrender, on this idea of really, to me, I touched on this last episode, but surrender to me is also like just giving yourself to the universe's will, which to me is also living in accordance with nature and allowing things to sort of develop as they will, right? Getting into a flow, not worrying about outcomes, but just sort of being present and creating. Living your actual truth and not society's definition of truth. And we're going to get into all that, in a second. I think I'm going to pause here before we get too long into it. We'll take a quick break, and then I'll come back to those ideas I just mentioned, but we'll be right back. All right, we're back, and I want to bounce back to some of these ideas that I kind of teased before the break. One of the things that has been really, I just read it, like literally finished reading it this week. It was a book I just picked up, but it reinforced a lot of the ideas that I was thinking, right? And it's a book called Don't Believe Everything You Think by Joseph, I believe it's Nugent, or I think he pronounced it in a different way. I apologize. I can't remember the proper way of pronouncing the last name, but his general philosophy in this book is, and it's kind of like an obvious duh, but believes that our thinking is the root of our sadness, right? And he identifies the idea of the difference between thoughts and actually thinking. Thoughts are the things that are constantly popping up in our head that we can't really control, right? We all have tons of rational and irrational thoughts constantly floating around in our head. And that thinking is us actually indulging in those thoughts. And we have a choice on that. We don't actually have to indulge in every single thought that comes across our mind, right? And it's the idea that we choose to interact and indulge and take action by thinking on the negative thoughts that pop up in our head. And that's what leads to a lot of our sadness. And basically, a lot of his argument in this book, or his suggestion, is the key to our happiness is to spend as much time as possible in a flow state. And that's sort of like the idea of, like, when you're doing something, you're really enjoying yourself, and like hours pass by and you're like, shit, I can't believe I've been doing this thing for 3 hours, right? It feels like 10 minutes. I had such a good time doing it. I was locked in. Nothing else mattered, right? That's a flow state. And often that comes from doing the things that we enjoy, the things that we're passionate about, things that engage with, us, or the, spending time with the people that we love and that we really enjoy being around, right? And I think flow is also about surrendering and doing what feels right in the moment without getting caught up on the outcome, right? When you're working on like a creative project and you're in a flow state, you're just in it, creating second by second, thought to thought, idea to idea. You're not thinking about the potential outcome of it in that moment when you're truly in flow, right? Or if you've ever been in love, or you're on, a great first date or something like that, right? Like nothing else in the world matters aside from that, right? When you're there, some of you might be married or have a girlfriend, boyfriend, partners, or, you remember what it was like at some point. You were in a relationship where you were just enamored by somebody and literally nothing else mattered but being in the moment with them, and whatever, 5 hours flew by and you wanted, 5 more, right? Like it felt like it wasn't even long enough. That's like this beautiful flow state of just being hyper present, lost in the moment, and not thinking about any outcomes. But again, you're just focused on enjoying the present moment, what's in front of you, right? And that's the goal, is to live in that place as much as humanly possible. And of course, it's impossible to always be there. But if you have a career or a job that gets you into that state, it's incredibly fulfilling, right? For me, podcasting, when I'm in it, and this happens majority of the time, a lot of times, even like today, and I say this all the time, it makes it sound like I hate this, but, I was prepping for the episode, and I am doing this, at the end of a long day, and a part of me was like, I don't know if I have it in me to go sit down and do it. But once I sit down, boom, I'm literally just speaking top of mind, not overanalyzing anything. I'm lost in it, I know for a fact, just as it always does, when I finish it, I'm like, whew, I really enjoy that. Like, that was a relief. I'm glad I did that, right? That's because I got in a flow state, got lost in something that I truly enjoy doing. And that's me just being present and surrendering to what ideas and conversation come to mind. If you could see my notes, it's really just like bullet points. I'm literally just freestyling this off the top of my head for the most part, right? And what I recognize, again, beginning this year, I wasn't getting in that state of mind because I was literally taking on projects as a means to an end. And Joseph talks about this in that book as well, Don't Believe Everything You Think, which is on Audible or Amazon. It's a short book, so it's a short Audible read, or the physical book I don't think is that big either. But talks about this idea of the difference between us doing work that is a means to an end, right? Which is most people's jobs. That's why most people are stressed out. It is the idea that I need money, therefore I need to take this job. It's a means to an end. Rather than if you are passionate about a creative project or whatever it might be, it's not a means to an end. It's genuinely something that you need to do because it fulfills you, right? It is something that fills you up rather than just something you're doing out of sort of desperation or necessity, right? And that's the difference. And what I recognized was I was doing too many things that were a means to an end. Yes, they're related to what I love to do creatively, but I got into them with the notion that I need to make more money so that I can elevate and buy the next house and live the next version of my lifestyle that I want, and to sustain the lifestyle that I currently have and grow it, right? I need to now make more money, or I need to have all these backup plans in place. And while all of that has its place and while all of it is important to a degree, it's not going to yield the best results or yield the happiest version of me. And it wasn't. I burnt myself out again within basically weeks of being back on doing podcasting full time, because I put so much pressure on myself, and everything I was doing even outside of Life as a Gringo means to an end. And I wasn't enjoying these projects. I was, dreading when I have to meet up, stop and do the meetings for them and do the creative ideas. I'm slacking, I'm dragging my feet. It's because these were things I knew I was creating for the sake of elevating my income, because that was a goal I set for myself this year. And what I sort of did was like, you know what, man? I don't know what the next year is going to look like. I don't know if we're going to hit the goals that we have set for ourselves for this year. But what I do know is this pressure that I've been putting on my shoulders for this year is not working. I am a shell of myself. Not only am I stressed and unfulfilled, I'm not even able to work at a high level on the things that I do enjoy or the things that are priorities. I'm literally just getting by because I'm burning myself out with all of these expectations and unnecessary pressure. And what began to solve that for me was to just say, hey, what is calling your name right now? Without thinking about if it's worth your time, what's lighting a fire for you right now? Like, what extra projects that you're interested, are you like actually really wanting to do, but you're not letting yourself do because it doesn't make sense financially or time-wise? And for me, some of you follow me on Instagram, you might have seen like this little soft launch I did of this sort of alter ego named Benny Pinheiro, which is like my alter ego DJ guy, right? And for me, I've had this idea of this character of just having like a separation from Dramos and being able to just do this whole other thing. I've had this idea probably for 2 years at this point, but I refuse to allow myself to indulge in it because it didn't make sense for me in a financial or even just sort of lifestyle mindset, right? It just seemed like me going back to the ridiculous idea that 20-something-year-old me had of what he wanted his life to look like. And in doing my party con fuego I have been doing recently and DJing that, and I've just been having a lot of fun DJing in general for the most part, I was like, listen, for whatever reason, music is lighting that fire for me again. I'm not saying that it's going to be my main thing, but at least let me just give myself the freedom to indulge it and explore the curiosities that are coming up for me. And that's what I began to do. I made some like little edits or remixes, a lot of fun to do it. I went to Puerto Rico and just shot some content for it and had fun just being like a person creating content, not even worried about views, right? I was literally just like, oh, listen, what's my creative eye telling me? Oh, this looks like a cool place to shoot a video as a backdrop. Let me do it for fun. And that's what I was doing. And I was having a blast just doing that without being too stressed out or worried about what the outcome is going to be. I don't want to be a DJ who's on the road 300 days a year. No interest in that, right? So this really isn't going to be like a life-changing thing for me. There are aspects of, I would love to maybe travel once a month, doing some cool gigs and things like that. Cool. But that's not going to be like the thing that pays my bills at the end of the day. But it is re-energizing me. So there is value right there. And again, as life has always done for me, when I follow my curiosity, when I follow the fire, it leads me to unexpected places or puts me in a state of mind that gives me the happiness and clarity needed to see unexpected possibilities. And that's sort of what, in a very short time, like the Benny Piñero project has done. It's de-stressed me and given me at least a bit more peace of mind to just sort of surrender and allow where life goes, right? And I talk a lot about the idea of living in accordance with nature. And I think this is, to me, related to the idea of surrendering, of just trusting the natural rhythm of the universe and the way that it leads us to unexpected places. And of course, goals are great. Having intention, an idea of where you want to be, who you want to be, are all incredibly important. But they're important because they set you out on the journey. And that's really the sort of real value of a goal. It puts you into action mode. And when you're in action mode, that's when discovery and opportunity happen, right? It's like if you're looking to find your soulmate, but you never leave the house and never talk to anybody, it's probably safe to say they're not just going to show up at your doorstep. But by you going out and meeting up with friends, joining a running club or a book club or whatever, you're taking action. And by taking action, you're allowing the universe to do what it does. But the thing I think where a lot of us fuck up, and myself in general, or myself included, I should say, we get so hyper fixated on the goal, the idea, that we grip onto it so tightly that we forget about the surrendering part, the living in accordance with nature part, the idea that there are greater forces sort of working. And we deviate from just being present. And that lack of presence doesn't allow us to see all of the amazing gifts around us, but also the endless amount of opportunity that lies around us. And again, that's what I was doing to start this year. And I was only inviting stress into my life. And again, this has only been a few weeks of like this sort of clarity. I don't know. I don't have all the answers. But there has been this sense of peace in saying, I know I'm doing my part. I'm taking action. I'm actively surrendering. I'm taking action with the knowledge that I will be guided in some way, shape, or form to where I'm supposed to be, as long as I just keep taking the steps on the journey. And again, that has brought me this sort of wave of peace that is sort of a non-negotiable for my life. I want a peaceful life, right? I want to not have to be stressed about random things every single day, which is obviously something that 50% of Americans feel at their job on a daily basis. That's what I'm trying to get away from. And while I may not know where I'm going yet, or how things may change or not change, I know that I'm leaving myself open and I'm doing my part once again. And I'm going to bounce to just like a couple different ideas quickly. I know I don't want to get too long on this and then it gets repetitive, but I think also when we look at like why people are unhappy at their work, at their jobs, for some people, it might not even just be the structure of it, right? I'm speaking about my own thing. Some people like that structure, and that's beautiful. I actually like some sort of structure to a degree. But I think a lot of it too is people are working jobs or in situations that are not purpose-driven, right? They're not doing something that they feel is bigger than themselves, that is truly worthy of them and their time. And I think this is where a lot of people are sort of falling short on their own fulfillment as well. And philosopher Carl Jung, he's actually a psychologist. He's like him and like he was studying under Freud, who correct me if I'm wrong, but he's like a psych major, but I believe they're like considered kind of the fathers of modern psychology, Freud specifically. But Carl Jung believed that human beings were meant to have a purpose bigger than themselves to truly be fulfilled, right? That just living for themselves, they would never find real fulfillment. That like this is inherently built into our DNA, that we have to live for something bigger than ourselves. And I think that's where a lot of people are finding their unhappiness, because they're showing up to a job that, again, full circle, is just a means to an end for them. It's a paycheck to allow them to have a place to live, to take care of their loved ones, to have food on the table, right? But it's lacking any sort of purpose. Therefore, it's going to be lacking fulfillment. And I think a lot of the sort of societal norms that we have adapted, the capitalist norms, leads people to sort of collecting jobs, collecting money, collecting titles, collecting power, just for the sake of doing it, just for the sake of being able to say that you have it. And it gets us away from truly living a happy and fulfilled and peaceful life, right? And I think I touched this last episode as well, but like you think about the way that our ancestors, the indigenous people, lived. They weren't living with excess. They believed in sharing with themselves and strangers. They didn't hold on to material things. They each played a role within their society and equally enjoyed the fruits of their joint labor. And while, of course, their life, like nobody else's, wasn't, stress-free, they led a far more peaceful and natural way of life. And I think as we've obviously, our generations detached from that and have adapted a lot of sort of obsession with the idea of money and materialism and been sold these ideas of what we need and norms and all these things, we're getting further and further away from the sort of human basics of happiness. And if we're not mindful of the fact that a lot of what we've been taught by society about what should make us happy or will make us happy is actually a complete lie and actually the opposite of what's real, if we don't come to terms and recognize that, we're going to just get caught in this trap of the rat race that is designed to make us sacrifice the best years of our lives just for the sake of checking boxes. And not even checking your own boxes. What's even worse, checking the boxes of somebody else. And I'll kind of close on this. I've been really into the philosopher Nietzsche, depending how you pronounce it. But he talks about the idea how we as human beings believe we're like the center of the universe. Again, I think I lightly mentioned this in the last episode. But also to him, he says, in some of his writings, he says to the mosquito is the center of the universe, right? That really, we are expendable as human beings. Earth existed before us and it's going to exist long after we're gone, right? We are frail, fragile beings, essentially, right? We can die very easily, right? We're not, regardless of how wealthy we are, all of us have an expiration date and all of us are susceptible to having a tragedy occur at any time potentially, God forbid, right? So we're not invincible. And the thing that separates us, he says, from other animals, other beings on this planet is the fact that we've been given the gift of intellect, right? But what he talks about is the fact that most people use their intellect as a sort of simulation, right? Their intellect gives them a false lens by which they're viewing the world and by which they value certain things, right? We live sort of by a societally accepted truth rather than our own truth. And I'll try to like dissect that a bit. It might be like a heady kind of concept, but it's the idea, like you think about the 9-to-5 lifestyle, the white picket fence, all these things, right? That is a societally accepted truth of the American dream, quote unquote, right? And that societally accepted truth has set forth generations on a path of trying to obtain it by any means necessary, right? When in reality, many of the people going out on that path are not actually living their truth or what would actually make them happy, but instead living for the acceptance and validation from society or their community or those around them. Again, they're living by someone else's truth, a simulated, societally designed truth, and adapting it as their own, even though it doesn't actually provide them with any real fulfillment. And that's what most of us are doing each and every day. And this is what I'm fighting against, what I'm trying to get in touch with myself. Again, when I get down to the core, just to kind of tie it all together, when I get down to the core of like what makes me happy? It's being my own boss. It's setting my own schedule. It's having flexibility in my schedule. If I want to travel during the week, if I want to go do this, go do that. Having some, extra money around if I feel like indulging in my clothing interest or traveling or giving back, right? I want to have the flexibility and the comfort to be able to give back to my community, have the time and finances to do so, right? All those things I mentioned, living a more peaceful life. And that's the core of what's important. What's not as important is the way by which I achieve that. It doesn't matter if I do it while being, by being famous. Doesn't matter if I do it while doing something that my parents are proud to tell their friends about. That's irrelevant. And again, I'm not saying this isn't a free-for-all to go, I don't know. Whatever your moral line is, you break it. We all have a moral line that is also, like, for me, I'm not going to go sell drugs to do it, to live that life, because that's also goes against the ideal version of life that I have, right? I want to live a peaceful life where I could do something that I'm personally proud of, and I wouldn't be proud of myself being a drug dealer, right? So this isn't a free-for-all to, like, just give up your morals and do anything as a means to live that free life that I'm talking about, right? It's all intertwined with like what's morally important to you as well. But what I'm getting at is, for me, it was like, it's only success if I can do something that everybody else is like jealous of as well, right? And I'm redefining what success means for me and shedding the idea of this identity that I have built or that people who follow me on social media have built about me, and not giving into their expectations or the sort of expectations I've set on myself as a result of wanting to gain acceptance, right? But instead, again, saying, hey, maybe I'm speaking to a camera this year, podcasting, and making money that way, and people are recognizing me from that. Maybe next year, the way I achieve my dream life is by having a quiet business that is not necessarily impressive to other people, but financially is giving me exactly what I need to live the life that I want to live, right? And time-wise is giving me the ability to live the life I want to live. And being okay with that, because, again, I'm getting down to the core of what really moves the needle for me, and being okay with shedding identity over time if need be. I hope that this was making sense. But it's the idea of just trusting that life is going to take you where you need to be, and it doesn't have to look like you think it will. It doesn't have to make sense to anybody else. You just have to get clear on what exactly it is that you want and then take action accordingly and trust the universe to do the rest and be okay with wherever it takes you. Different doesn't mean bad at the end of the day. I guess that's what I'm also trying to say. Be in the flow of just life. And within that, because that's going to lead into like the Ask a Gringo as well, when I talk about the idea of purpose bigger than yourself, I think about that also in surrendering to the idea that we're all in this together, right? I live a life, and I want to live a life. That's why I said like being a drug dealer goes against this. I want to live a life where I know that I'm also positively contributing to my community and those around me and the world as a whole. That's a part of the quality of life that I want for myself. Knowing that we each have a role to play, and each of us being happy and fulfilled only makes this world a better place, right? And getting to the idea of I don't need to have excess, and I don't need to be selfish with my time or my knowledge if it means it can help someone else. Because we're all sharing this planet together. And again, what is it? What's the saying? What's good for the hen is good for the gander. What's good for the gander is good for the rooster. One of those things. One of those ideas of what's basically good for you or another person is good for everybody as a whole, essentially. The idea that, I think I fucking brutalized that saying, whatever it might be. But it's the idea that we're surrendering to just living a more in tune lifestyle. And being in tune means having empathy for your brothers and sisters that share this planet with you, essentially, right? With the people that share this planet with you. And recognizing your duty in being blessed with life and the ability to live it, even if you don't have, crazy, extra money or whatever it might be, in some way, shape, or form, you could give back, and it's your duty because you've been blessed to have life on earth. So in that same sort of tribe mentality of being purpose-driven, that you want to do your part to make sure that the tribe is thriving and being healthy. I think that's part of what's being spoken about with the idea of purpose-driven leading to fulfillment, right? I don't know about y'all, but when I talk to people or when they tell me like, man, something you said really helped me out, I feel incredibly fulfilled on the inside. When I talk to some people from the Just Be Social Club and they're telling me about how the experience really has changed them for the better, I get emotional. I get overtaken with joy because I know that I'm being a good member of this tribe of Earth, of the universe, right? I'm contributing something. I am helping other people, which is doing a small part of helping the world as a whole in some sort of way or fashion, right? And that adds fulfillment, and I want to dig deeper into that. I want to have more time to do that, more resources to do that, right? And understanding that when I make that sort of my goal, my focus, when that becomes one of my main priorities, and I just set out to take action on that, life will continue to reward me in some sort of way because I'm living in accordance with nature. I'm living in accordance with the universe and being a good contributing member to the world as a whole. And that's going to come back to me in some way, shape, or form in some sort of opportunity to continue living the life that I dream about, right? And that's what I believe. And that's sort of been more of my philosophy, and surrendering to that instead of chasing the next check to buy that bigger house, let me just double down on being of service. And that's going to lead me to either that house or something far better than it, far more fulfilling than that, right? Whatever the universe thinks and knows that I need, I should say. So I hope I pulled that all full circle. And we're going to actually touch on that a bit with the Ask a Gringo segment next.
Ask a Gringo.
I have a question.
All right, so for this one, I just simply asked people about the idea of you thinking if it's your duty to help those in need, right? And most of the answers I got were kind of in line with my own philosophy. And I was actually kind of hoping I might get somebody to push back a little bit, but y'all are just good people who follow me, I guess. At DJ Dramos is going to be a part of these conversations, but I had mentioned this before. I think I was talking to a friend of mine when I was in Puerto Rico. We went out to dinner, and I always constantly reference like somebody like Bad Bunny or Residente as like Puerto Ricans who are very outspoken on a lot of the issues facing the community, and I salute them for that. But I also say people like them, with the amount of money and power and connections they have, they could be doing more to really move the needle for change for the community. And my friend always pushes back and says, but that's not their job. That's not their duty. They have the ability to choose to do that, but that's nobody's sort of like, you can't force that choice on somebody. Again, it's a choice. And yes, I agree that it is a choice, but I believe anybody who decides not to make that choice has a sort of, and no offense to anybody who doesn't agree to this, but this is my viewpoint on it. Anybody who chooses not to make that choice to sort of do something when they have the means to do it, or to do more than just the bare minimum, to me, anybody who chooses not to do that, you have a very sort of skewed view on society, and you are a victim of the capitalist mentality that we have adapted as normal in our current world. And you're sort of going against the natural human desire for connection and sharing. And I would say you're probably lacking fulfillment somewhere that maybe you're not even aware of, right? Because you sort of deviated from the natural existence that human beings have of community and giving, basically, right? As we talked about, like our ancestors with the indigenous people. And that's sort of where I look at all of this from. You're going against sort of the natural mentality that we as human beings have as even children, right? Children are always there to like share, I mean, obviously some kids are a little bit stingy, but like how many times you've been with like a baby and they like are eating something and they go to give you some as well, right? Like that is sort of inherently natural, and that it's through society that we begin to lose that part of ourselves to a degree. And that's sort of what I would argue in that point. Now, obviously, like I said, I got a bunch of sort of similar responses to what I already feel. I'll just quickly go through a few here. Let's see. At Crystal Doll Art says, yes, full stop, do the right thing. At Doug Spin says, if I can, I definitely will. At Tara C. Prout says, yes, 100%. So everybody's kind of like very much sort of in line with this idea that I've been proposing as well. Now we have at Bren J Life Coaching, the homie in this. She says, I don't really have the means, and yes, because if I don't, who will? Not in an ego way, but in the sense that I don't want to be someone continuously bitching about things and then not doing anything about it. Although now it's biting me in the ass in different ways because I'm overwhelmed, stressed, and spread a little too thin. And I think this is where you have to strike a balance, right? Because you can't pour from an empty cup, as they say. So I'm not saying to bleed yourself dry of all your energy and resources in helping others. You have to help yourself first in order to be able to help others. So there has to be a boundary there, right? You have to do this in a healthy manner. I'm not saying Bad Bunny has to go broke or give up all his money saving Puerto Rico. That's not what I'm saying at all. I think you have to develop a boundary as to what are you okay with parting with, whether it's time, money, resources, energy. What can you healthily part with? And do that. Right? When I'm talking about, and this is different for all of us. We all have different levels of being able to give, or different time, or different energy that we'll be able to give to something. I'm not saying you have to give up your entire life to someone else, or necessarily even make it your life's work. but in some sort of way, what you're able to truthfully give, what's your truth, give it basically, right? Don't move from a place of selfishness, of thinking like, I've worked hard, therefore, I deserve all this. You figured out, I did too. That's where the unhealthiness comes from. And then on the other side of it, right, you never want to go to the extreme where you're literally living in dire circumstances, be it your health or finances, because you just keep giving to people. There has to be a balance. Obviously, I'm not telling anybody to be irrational. But I think the goal should be that when you're able to, you give in some way, shape, or form. That you can honestly say that when I'm able to, I give my time. When I'm able to, I give my energy. When I'm able to, I might give my finances to people or organizations that I deem, worthy or in need of. And I think those little things, those little decisions, giving yourself to a project that is purpose-driven, whatever it might be, that is you sort of doing your part as a good tribe member and sort of surrendering to nature in that way. And that's a beautiful thing. I think that's the goal at the end of the day. For me personally, and what I'm really trying to push home for people listening in my own way, I guess. So that's that. Thank you all so much for participating at DJ Dramos. If you want to be part of these conversations, I kind of feel like I summarized this like 3 times, but we'll quickly tie everything we talked about today in a neat little bow in a segment we call Conclusion Stew.
Time for conclusion stew.
All right, so I'm not going to beat a dead horse here. I feel like I drove point my point as clearly and concisely as humanly possible, but I think it's just if I could just like reiterate anything to take away from it, it's get clear on what's important to you. What's important to you personally? What makes you immediately happy? What are your non-negotiables? And what's important to you from a purpose-driven standard, right? Of what things or people or movements or projects would you like to be a part of that you feel like could contribute positively to your fellow tribe members around the world? And once you're sort of clear on that, of who you want to be, how you want to live, then build life around that, right? Those really core, important, personally gratifying and fulfilling things. Build your life around that. And obviously, it's easier said than done. Some of you might have families. You might have a career, and now you have responsibilities, a house to pay for, a mortgage, college for your kids, whatever it might be. I get that. But I think it's about slowly chipping away. What little things can I do now just to keep getting me closer and closer little by little, and surrendering and trusting the universe and knowing that as long as, even if I'm walking at a snail's pace, as long as I'm doing something to take action on getting down this path, eventually the universe is going to reward me or lead me to where I'm supposed to be, lead me to a place that gets me that much more fulfillment. Again, it doesn't have to be a gigantic change today, but allowing yourself to surrender your ego, surrender the identity that you've built, in this life and the idea you have of yourself and the idea that people have of you, surrendering the need to fulfill all of that, and instead just getting down to the core of what really matters to you and slowly finding ways to obtain more and more of it. That's, I think, the goal. And if you're lucky enough to have kids, I would love if that became the philosophy that we could pass down to the next generation so that they can really get clear on what's important and would make them happy, so they don't end up like the 50% of Americans who talk about feeling stressed at their jobs or are angry or sad or are worried constantly, right? The scary large number of people who are unhappy in their 40-hour-week workplace. How can we avoid another generation of having to experience that? How can we save ourselves from it, right? These are the questions that I'm beginning to try to pose and implement into my own life, and really just getting clear on what moves the needle for me and how can I do more and more of it. So I just wanted to share sort of what I've been pondering on, and hopefully this resonates for somebody out there. Definitely hit me up if it does. I always love hearing that feedback, so I kind of know if I should just shut up or keep going on these things. Just Be Social Club. Again, we're doing like the friends and family invites right now. We're really working hard on like the back end and figuring that stuff out. But DM me at DJ Dramos if you're interested in being a part of our community that's growing, or email Brenda at mindofayounglord.com. That link is going to be in the show notes. If you want to read that full CNBC article about people in the workplace, I'll have it linked in the show notes as well. And that's it. I'll catch you on Thursday for our Thursday Trends episode. Till then, stay safe, and we'll talk soon. Peace.